Hi, I'm Brooke Hazzard, and welcome to another episode of The Edge. Sometimes the youngest people need the biggest defense, especially in the U.S. Here in Pennsylvania, according to the statewide Child Protective Services, in 2017, 48% of all substantiated reports of sexual abuse were sexual abuse. According to Darkness to Light, a way we can prevent sexual abuse, or any other kind for that matter, is by looking for emotional signs. These signs may vary from too perfect all the way to extreme anger. It's hard to know whether a child is facing abuse, but it's always good to be looking for a change in behavior or an extreme one. Now, you may be thinking that kids affected by child abuse should be removed from their houses, but that's not always the solution. Eli Newberger reports that the process of determining if a child should be removed from their home is more difficult than suspected, by weighing the trauma of family separation against the possibility of further abuse. Caseworkers have to draw this line every day. Last year, in the western region of Pennsylvania, the statewide Child Protective Services found 702 reports of child abuse. All of us need to be on alert to help report and prevent child abuse. So we've brought in Counselor Pauline Amaismeier for Counseling and Trauma Services to talk about identifying and preventing child abuse. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'd like to start off by asking, what is child abuse?
Child abuse is defined by, in certain areas, child abuse is physical abuse, emotional or mental abuse, and that includes verbal or sexual abuse of children. Now, there's also another part that is called child neglect. And child neglect can be physical neglect, where they don't have enough food or clothing or shelter. It can be emotional neglect, where they don't have their emotional needs met. No hugs, no love, just very stoic and nobody to touch. It can also be medical neglect, where the child needs medical attention and it is not given. So that's the definition of childhood abuse and neglect.
Okay, that sounds like a lot of things that could happen. How do children react to the abuse and neglect?
Well, they become sad and guarded. They can also act out more. You might notice a hyper startle if you see a child, and then they'll go, instead of it's a very, very exaggerated startle. But if you ask the child what's going on, oh, nothing, I'm fine. Because if this is their parents, if this is their caretakers, who else do they have to take care of them? They have to, if they say anything bad about mom or dad, well, what's going to happen to them? So they many times will not disclose it.
Then how do adults or friends get children to talk about child abuse?
Well, they're not going to talk about child abuse per se. Let me give you an example of physical abuse. When a child is physically abused, they may have a lot of bruises, contusions. They may go into the hospital emergency room a lot. There's going to be, they're just going to look battered. I was working in a school one day, because I'm a nurse too, and this kid came in with a red mark on their neck. And the teacher brought them to me. And what I did was I sketched it out, and the red mark was a handprint. And you couldn't tell that it was a handprint just from looking at it, because it was around. But once I sketched it out, it was a handprint. So sometimes there's visible marks on the children, and then you can tell. For sexual abuse, it's very insidious. if the child could have damage in the perineal area, there could be bruising, there could be, and these are the physical effects, there could be sexually transmitted diseases. There could be, I'm trying to think, that's what I'm thinking about right now. Now, with emotional abuse, that's a lot harder. Do you know what emotional abuse is?
Not necessarily.
Okay. I'm going to pretend I'm going to be abusive to you, okay? Do you know you're a lousy person? I don't even know why you're here right now. You are not smart. Why should you even try to do that?
Okay.
That made you feel pretty bad.
Yeah.
And it wasn't real, by the way.
Yeah.
But to have somebody just talking to a kid and just downing them all the time, like, you idiot. Well, what do you think that's going to do to the child? They're going to have a really poor self-image. They're not going to think about themselves. If they don't think they can do good, why should you even try? Because it's useless. If other people don't believe you can do it, then you can't.
Yeah, so would like the physical signs, as you were saying, would that be enough to do a case? Would that be enough evidence to do a case for child abuse?
Yes. The nice thing that the state of Pennsylvania has done is they have said that you don't have to prove that it's child abuse if you even suspect. If you have a glimmer that this child is being abused, then you call Childline, or you can go to the Pennsylvania website and report it via internet, via the website. So it doesn't have to be proved, it just has to be suspected. And then CYS will become involved, and they can then do the investigation. It's not up to you to do the investigation. All you have to do is suspect it.
Is there a way that we can help if we felt that the internet or a hotline wasn't enough?
Yes, there is. Emotional abuse itself is not always reportable because there isn't anything physical. But what you can do is be a friend to that child. You can, if they're a smaller child, you can be a mentor. There are cases and cases and cases of people who grew up in bad environments experiencing abuse, and they turn out really well, and it's because they have a mentor. They have somebody who believes in them, who they can go to for some guidance, who can give them hugs if they need hugs, and who will listen to them and treat them like they're important. I think that's a very big job, and yes, you can do that.
I'm glad that I can. And so for those who don't have a mentor, how are they affected later in life?
There is a study. It's called the ACE study. It's pretty old now. And what it does is it looked at people's events that happened in people's childhoods, and then compared them to what happened when they were adults. And the ACE study has proven that there's an increased amount of autoimmune diseases when people experience abuse. There's an increased amount of depression. You can get PTSD from it. It can affect your self-worth. This has long-lasting effects. It really does. It's also treatable. So it's not like this is a hopeless cause.
Have you have you heard of cases where those who have suffered from child abuse that have gone on to do better things and like help other kids?
Absolutely. And it's called making meaning. You make something good come out of something bad. I don't know how it started, but the Guardian Angel program that was is one of them. I'm not intimately familiar with it, but it's when children at risk have monitors that they can call for help on at home if they need it. That's something good coming out of something that happened that was bad. And you can always make meaning. You can always make something good come out of it. Sometimes it takes a while. It doesn't happen immediately, but there can be growth from it.
So the Guardian Angel, what is it exactly, like everything behind it?
I believe that when children are identified as at risk, and they're working with, I don't know whether they would be working with CASA or CYS or the courts, but they're given a little thing, a little bracelet or a necklace, and if they need some help at home, if things aren't safe for them at home, they can press it, and people will come to check on them.
That's like, what do you know what the necklace looks like?
No, I don't. I've never seen it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Are there other organizations like the Guardian Angel, and like what organizations are like?
That I don't know, but I do know that CYS does the best job that they can to help children be safe. Also, there's an organization called CASA, and I'm sorry, that's an acronym, and I'm not remembering what it stands for, but what they are they're volunteers appointed by the court to be an advocate for children who are in the system and in possible abuse cases. So I think that the CYS and CASA and the courts are doing the best job that they can, but it's limited, and I think that by the normal everyday person being aware of what child abuse is and not being afraid to speak up is the most important thing, because you're the ones who have the power and the ability to make a difference and initiate some change.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna just take a quick peek. So, if we wanted, so my dad's company, whenever I lived in Texas, they funded a CASA organization, and how could people volunteer for the CASA thing?
Call them.
Call them?
Tell them. I'm sure that they're not going to turn volunteers away. You can always ask.
So how do the CASA volunteers help the children?
I am not intimately involved with them, but I do know that they visit them and they try to be a coordinator between all the services, and they're going to be an advocate any way that child needs an advocate to be.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have left for this section. We'll be back shortly after this break.
I'm Morgan Merdian, the co-host of the show The Edge, along Brooke Hazzard. Welcome back from the commercial break with Pauline. So, what would you say puts children at a higher risk for child abuse to happen?
Well, if their parents or guardians are in a domestic violence relationship, and domestic violence, people always think, well, it's the guy who's always acting out, but it's not. There's an increasing amount of women who are either verbally or physically abusive. So, and the children can either watch that, be exposed to that. How would you feel if you saw one of your parents getting slapped and hit? It would really hurt. Or they can be part of that. They can be physically or emotionally injured by that exposure. The second thing is if their parents or guardians have problems with addictions, especially drug and alcohol. Another one is if parents or guardians have an ongoing mental illness. A lot of times adults with mental illness are having a lot of trouble just taking care of themselves rather than also taking care of the children. If the parents don't really have their act together with being a parent, and this is especially true with single young caregivers who just don't have the knowledge. They've never been around a child before, and especially when you talk about young caregivers, they're trying to get their own act together, and then they're still supposed to care for a child. And there's a lack of community support, of social support, of family support for the caregivers, and they just get burnt out. And so all of these factors can increase the risk of child abuse.
So if a child is experiencing child abuse because of this, what should their next step in doing be if they want to report it?
So let me see if I get this right. So you're saying if you suspect child abuse,
if the child is experiencing it, and they want to say something to somebody, but they're scared, or how should they go about doing that?
I doubt if they will. Depending on how old they are. Legally, you're all children because you're not 18 yet. So I think that you have to divide up between little kids. They're not going to tell you. Teenagers, that's a different story. So what they can say, they may be able to say, I don't like what my mom is doing, I don't like what my dad is doing. They may not. You don't know. You really don't know. And that's where listening to what they say and what they don't say, and being aware for any kind of signs of physical abuse. The kids rarely, unless they're really good at being a teenager, really assertive, they're not going to say. That's not, they think that this is normal. They've not been around other families where it doesn't happen, because this is their family and that's what they live. This is their norm.
So how would you say that children cope whenever this is happening?
Well, they can withdraw. They can look sad. They can be sad. They can have crying spells. Sometimes they get angry. A lot of times, especially young children, they'll act out. They'll be bad. And it's because they're so sad. Their grades can go down in school. They can be really worried. Some, especially the older siblings, will try to protect the younger siblings and get very, very overprotective. Many times, too, the child starts parenting the parent instead of having the child role in the family. They'll have a parent role in the family. Yeah. There can be avoidance issues. They might not want to go home. I've had adults tell me that I've seen who grew up in abusive situations, I didn't want to leave school because school was a lot nicer than it was at home.
Yeah.
So that happens. These children don't have very good self-images. They really struggle with that. Anybody who will give them an attaboy or you did a good job, boy, they just want to hang around them because they don't get it other places.
Yeah. So how can we prevent child abuse?
I love that question. Thank you for asking it. Education. The more you can identify it, the more you can take a stand. Also, by reporting it, as I said to Brooke earlier, you don't have to absolutely know 100% that this child is in an abusive situation. Now, in Pennsylvania, you can report child abuse for physical abuse or for sexual abuse. Emotional abuse doesn't count, unfortunately, even though it's very, very damaging. And let me tell you, this is, do you like Harry Potter? I love Harry Potter. And in the fifth book of Harry Potter, The Order of the Phoenix, after that big battle at the Ministry of Magic, and Ron's in the Hogwarts hospital wing, and Harry goes to see him. Ron had been attacked by a brain, and he got all sorts of injuries, and the nurse is putting medicine on it, and she says, "Thoughts leave the deepest scars," and that's so true. Thoughts leave the deepest scars. But anyway, we're talking about reporting sexual and physical abuse, and that's the abuse that you would call Childline at. Now, when you call Childline, they're going to ask for your name and your address and what's going on. But when they go to investigate it, they never tell who called. So there's some safety in there. One of the things that I recommend is if you, as adolescents, as very informed adolescents, suspect some child abuse, you're not all by yourself. You're around people who have had training. You're around teachers. You've got your parents. You've got people around you who may be a little more knowledgeable, may be a little more aware. So don't keep it to yourself. Bounce it off somebody and see what they think. And when in doubt, like should I or should I not, you should. Okay. If the question is should I or should I not, then you should. Because if it doesn't come out, it doesn't come out, and that's okay. But you're erring on the side of caution. Okay.
How can students like us get more educated on child abuse?
But I was so pleased when Brooke sent me that email and called my office. So learn more about it. Also, there's, I put some websites up for PAR, which is Pittsburgh Action Against Rape, and RAIN, which is Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. And they have a lot of, now those are mainly child sexual abuse, but child sexual abuse is horrible, just horrible. Yeah. And especially what's been in the news. And the thing is, you don't know who's doing it, so I encourage you to do some investigating. Explore those websites, find out more things. Read more, talk about it. People usually aren't very comfortable talking about it, so don't be afraid to speak up and learn everything that you can, because the more you learn, that will just empower you to make healthier choices.
And going back to the Guardian Angels program, are the parents involved with that?
I think they have to know about it. But I just know, I'm just on the ancillary part of that, so I'm not that familiar with it, but I think it's a wonderful program. And somebody was telling me that the person who started that is in Peters, I think.
Oh, really?
I think. I'm not positive, but yeah.
Would you think that it would make the parents more mad? Like, knowing that they have a necklace that's because they're at risk from the parents?
They probably wouldn't like it, but if they have to have it, they have to have it.
Have you ever had a case where a child hasn't wanted to leave the household even though it was harmful?
Always. Because, you know, you only have one mom and you only have one dad. And mom and dad are really, really important no matter how rotten they are. And you have to remember, people aren't rotten 24/7. And these parents are not, many times this is how they were raised. And so you have dysfunctional parenting techniques going from generation to generation. Another thing is that we're not saying that the parents don't love the children. They're just not making it. They might be under the influence. They might be having anger issues. They're having to deal with their own problems. But that's not saying that they don't love their children. And so the children are in a no-win situation because sometimes mom and dad are really nice and wonderful. And then at other times, they hurt them. So if you had your choice, you don't want to lose that love and wonderful part, you know, and we're all hardwired to love our parents, and our parents are hardwired to love us. It's just we have to do it in a safe way, in a healthy way.
How can adults let children know that it's okay to talk about abuse if they are being abused?
I don't know if they would. I don't know. That's a good question. I doubt very much if especially in domestic abuse situations. Have you ever heard the term "what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas"?
Yeah.
In domestic abuse situations, especially, don't you tell. In sexual abuse situations, the perpetrator is going to say, don't tell. Especially in sexual abuse, if you tell, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt your mommy or your daddy or your brother or sister. Oh, listen to this. If you tell, the police are going to come and arrest me, and since I'm the one that's working and providing money for the rent, you know, they're going to take me to jail, and you're not going to have food or a place to live, and it'll all be your fault. Yeah. Whenever there's sexual abuse, there's always a threat against telling. And I have one lady that I'm working with right now, and her perpetrator said, if you tell anybody, nobody's going to love you anymore. So that's scary, and these are just little kids. Yeah. So they're not going to tell.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for coming in today. Child abuse has put a major death toll on the United States. Around 5 children die a day because of child abuse and neglect. Those who endure child abuse are more likely to become involved in criminal activity. 80% of those in prison met the criteria of a psychological disorder. Those that met the criteria reported childhood abuse. A report of child abuse is made every 10 minutes. The United States has one of the worst child abuse records among all of the industrialized nations, losing on average between 4 and 7 children every day. Children are not the only ones affected by abuse. Abuse affects everyone from infants to elders. If people learn and understand the signs of child abuse, we could save lives.